I'm used to buying for a lot of people, and I'm used to kind of stocking up buying, so we have to be careful about not overdoing it here, but let's see, vegetables.
He didn't trust his own instincts.
So we're gonna need 5 pounds of ground beef, some tater tots, and some cans of evaporated milk, cans of mushroom soup. You're gonna love it, Jeremy. We're gonna make tater tot casserole, which is mouth-watering. You can't believe how good it is.
Ginger's told me about these dishes, so
yeah,
it's about time I try them.
Hey everyone, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It's Wednesday, July 27th. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Listen, yesterday I did this video where I talked about Josh Duggar's auto company taxes and the amount that his assessed value of his businesses were over the years that we were looking at that he ran the business. So I thought that as I was looking through the fact that he had a very low level of inventory, a lot of you had a ton of insight. Some of you suggested that Josh Duggar could very well have been selling cars under the table for cash. With titles, though, that kind of stuff does have to be registered with the state. You can't just sell a car and not transfer the title. So I don't know about that, but I do think they could be some underestimation that he's reporting, right? What I do know is this. Right before Josh Duggar's sentencing, they started unloading a lot of assets, and it was pretty quick. First off, Anna closed a bunch of businesses. Secondly, she sold a bunch of property, okay? So there was a home that they had owned that they were planning to remodel and renovate. They sold that. There was another piece of property that they had next to that. They had split this piece of property into 3 separate parcels. All of that, for the most part, is gone now. Anna released herself from a loan that she took out against herself. I know, right? That was done in June. Then there was the closing of all of these businesses. So Josh Duggar was doing his best to make it look like he didn't have a lot of assets, that he didn't have a lot of money, and so he wouldn't have to have a high fine or restitution. That's my opinion. So it took them a while to clean up his finances, and they got rid of the property that he had, and he was given a fine of around $50,000 total. There was different levels of reasons for why things were fined, and at the time of sentencing, Judge Brooks told the court that Josh had the ability to pay the fine, and the amount due was due immediately. And they also found that if he also was not, they found that he did not have the ability to pay interest. So there was some sort of financial issues about the amount of money he actually had, and a lot of people were like, wow, this fine's pretty low considering, but you know, I think they did some maneuvering to make it look like they didn't have as much money as they did. So as I was looking through all of the transcripts for the courts, and you guys, I know sometimes I get stuck on these little tiny details, but these are the details that matter to me, because when I'm trying to figure out everything to do with the Duggars and how the IBLP works and all of the wranglings that have happened with this family and how they move money around, I'm still wondering how the IRS doesn't look into all of these LLCs, all of these different companies. I mean, the amount of companies that Josh has opened and did open in a very short period of time is shocking, right? So I was talking with a former friend of the Duggars, okay? And I wanted to get some insight about what is going on with this fine. Why wouldn't they just pay the amount of money? What is, like, it seems completely counter to the total teachings of the IBLP. So if you know anything about the IBLP, they teach about being debt-free and not having any debt. So you're supposed to pay for literally everything in cash. You are not supposed to have mortgages. You're not supposed to have credit cards. If you cannot buy something in cash, you should not buy it, okay? And this mindset is dangerous because people believe that they are not supposed to buy things unless they can afford it, and therefore a lot of people can't buy houses or if they do buy houses, they're not the best houses and they have to do a lot of work on them. It's a lot of pressure to put on someone to expect people to live debt-free. It's just, in this economy, it's not practical. And most financial advisors will tell you to have some level of debt so that you can work on your credit. And that's one problem that I think the Duggars have, is that because they don't use any debt and they don't have debt, they don't have great credit. You know, you can't have good credit unless you can prove that you have credit. Does that make sense? So they don't carry loans. And so then when they do need to get loans, they sometimes have to use UCC loans and liens, which are non-traditional ways of selling and getting loans for properties. So long story short, you're supposed to be able to pay for everything in cash, which they typically do, okay? So when I was looking at this whole situation with that, is when you have something that's due, you're also supposed to pay it. So you're not supposed to have debt, and you're supposed to pay off your debts as you get them. In this case, this was not something they were obviously anticipating. So it's not like he had maybe $50,000 sitting around. And so I was asking the former friend, and I said, listen, like, why the way that Jim Bob Duggar manages his business, the way that he has his perception going, the way that he wants people to believe that he has enormous wealth and that he is very good financially, why would he allow this fine not to be paid? Well, this is what the former friend said. And listen, these are their opinions based on their knowledge of being around the Duggars for a very long time. This is what they said. They said that knowing Jim Bob and Josh, they're not going to pay that until the very last minute. And I was like, what? What? And they said this: unless they are forced to pay that fine, they will not pay it until the very last minute. And I said, okay, so what do you mean? They said, if, for instance, the house that Jim Bob and Michelle owned were to end up being auctioned off here, they would pay it the day before it auctions. That's how they put it. Like, they would rather not pay it unless they have to. And I thought, well, that's weird. You don't like to have liens. Now, Jim Bob might not care because ultimately the lien is not in his name. It's in his son's name. And I did some digging to see if Josh is actually a trustee or beneficiary to any of the properties that Jim Bob and Michelle own. And so when I was looking through the trustee records, which were filed in Benton County, Jim Bob does not name any of his kids as a successor to his trust. So imagine you have 19 children and you do not trust any one of your children to become the trustee successor upon your demise. So when he and Michelle both passed away, their first successor that he picked was Mary Duggar. She's obviously no longer here. So who is going to have access to the trust and be able to deliver and work on behalf of a trust as a trustee? His CPA. So his CPA is his trustee upon his death, not his kids. The trust also is very limited in that it doesn't even name beneficiaries. Mary Duggars named beneficiaries. Mary Duggars named successors. Jim Bob doesn't have any beneficiaries named. So Jimmy Burns, unless they have a will, and they might have a will that hasn't been published, but we don't know how they're going to divide the properties, okay? So Josh is not listed as a trustee on the properties. The home is held in a trust that Josh Duggar is not named of. He just happens to live there. So would the lien actually go against the property? I don't know how it could, but apparently it is, okay? So why wouldn't they pay it off given that it's against his property, even though it's not in his name and it's in Josh's name? Another factor they said is the appeals. So the Duggars are still telling people that Josh Duggar is innocent. And from a perception point of view, paying the fine would mean that they accept the fact that Josh Duggar is guilty and that Josh Duggar accepts the fact that he's guilty and he's going to do his sentence without any issues. So they're not going to pay the fine as long as the appeal is outstanding because they believe, wrongly, that Josh Duggar has a successful chance of winning an appeal and having his case overturned. And I was like, so they really believe that they can have this case overturned. And two sources have said that that's the belief, is that the family believes that they will be able to have his conviction overturned upon appeal. And as far as if that doesn't work, then they might pay the fine. Then. Or he's going to make Josh pay it, which would be weird. But the judge did put into payment that during the time that he's in jail, 50% of the amount of money that's in his balance will go towards his fine. So if he has a balance for anything, like every prisoner is allowed to have accounts, right? And they're allowed to have money in the accounts, and the accounts are used for paying for a variety of different things on their commissary and other different things that they need to pay for while they're in prison, phone calls, that kind of stuff. So 50% of his available balance will go towards his fine, which is an incentive for them to not give him a lot of money while he's in there, because 50% of his money is going to go towards those fines. Then once he's out, he has 20 years to pay it off, and he has to pay about $500 a month, or up to like 15% of his gross income, or gross income monthly. So Josh Duggar is not going to pay the fine unless he has to. Jim Bob Duggar's certainly not going to pay it unless he has to, and they will only pay it if they have to. And I was like, well, will they pay it upon the appeal? And if they win the appeal, if say that they don't win the appeal, will they pay it off? And they said maybe. I just think it's weird because I can't imagine Jim Bob looking at his property, having a lien on it, being happy with that. He doesn't like to have debt, and that looks like debt to him. So that's just my opinion. That's just me. So long story short, the reason why it hasn't been paid, in the opinion of the former Duggar friend, is that Jim Bob will not pay it unless he has to, unless his house is auctioned off, or unless the appeal is lost. And until the appeal is lost, don't expect Mr. Duggar to help his son out of this jam. But the question here is he's willing to not pay the fine, but he's continuing to pay for Josh Duggar's appeal, right? Those are very expensive. I wonder how much money his attorneys are getting for this. We should be expecting filings in August, so we'll know what they're going to argue. But yeah, that's why the Duggars aren't paying the fines. So don't say that they're not frugal. And it's weird because they have so much warehouse space with all the junk that they've collected over the years. You'd think that they would just sell some stuff off and then use that to pay the fine off. You know that they've got that money in their hands. They could totally just pay it, maybe. Either way, that's what I have for now. So what are your thoughts? Tell me in the comments below. Bye, guys.